So a major theme here is if they discredit local law enforcement agencies enough, they don't have to ask for a central police agency. People will demand it. So they'll discredit local police forces, and sometimes police don't always act properly. And occasionally, police will misbehave and do things that are wrong, and those items are blown totally out of proportion. And the net result is that people say, well, we cannot trust our local police. He said to say the alternative could be a national police force. And the history of that is just unbelievable. So here we are 50 years after that Senate hearing, and things haven't changed a lot. If you look at the average newspapers, the New York Times, in New York City, the police department was conducting surveillance recently on Muslim student groups. And the attacks, you can see here, Muslim leaders unite to oppose New York Police Department's fine, and so forth. And actually what took place here is the New York City Police Department was attending public meetings like this that Muslims were conducting. They went to student websites available to anyone. So there was no, at least what's been released to date, there was no indication the police had done anything at all that was wrong. They were simply surveilling student groups. Now, the question here is, were they justified in doing that? Here's, if you look at, I don't know how well you can read this, but there are a dozen here of incidences where Muslim students are either directly involved in terrorist activity or attach themselves to Muslim student groups that were in fact directly involved with criminal activity. 4 of these groups are located in New York City. And in each instances here, the individuals located in those organizations were planning or helping to perpetrate terrorist activities against the police department or against landmarks in New York City and other places. So the question here is, were the police justified in this type of surveillance? I mean, from a former policeman standpoint, I would say absolutely. The key for law enforcement is to prevent the problem. And if you can investigate and make a determination that some individual or organization is planning to perpetrate a terrorist act or a crime, it makes all the sense in the world to obviously prevent this before it can happen. And it requires surveillance in some cases to do that sort of thing. Many years ago, police had penetrated various communist and leftist organizations and were able to obtain a lot of information and were able to neutralize a lot of the activity of those individuals. And essentially they're trying to do that again today. But the attacks on the police for doing this are just astonishing. People who are politically correct are finding all kinds of reasons to say that these people are being profiled. And what the police are saying is that, look, most of the terrorist activity have come out of Muslim groups. And if these Muslim students, and most of them are probably very innocent and nice young people, but the terrorists attach themselves to these groups to sort of give themselves an exterior of credibility. So when they perpetrate these acts, it's difficult to see them coming. In July 2nd, 2008, in Colorado Springs, Colorado, a United States senator in a campaign speech made the following statement: "We cannot continue to rely on our military in order to achieve the national security objectives that we've set. We've got to have a civilian national security force just as powerful, just as strong, just as well funded." That was then Senator and current President Barack Obama made that statement. Now you got to think about this statement for a moment. A national security force just as powerful as the U.S. military. The power of the military comes from the vast array of weapons that it has in its arsenal. Surely the President doesn't plan to arm the national security force with tanks, armored personnel carriers, artillery, and a variety of other weapons. I'm sure the President wouldn't do that. And Another comment in the President's statement was this national security force would be just as strong as the United States military. Currently, there are 1.5 million Americans serving in our military. Are we to expect a national security force of 1.5 billion people in its ranks? Finally, the President said this security force would be just as well funded as the U.S. military. The current defense appropriation budget is $662 billion. It's interesting to note that the President calls this civilian national security force a civilian national security force. I believe the name was carefully chosen so as not to violate the Posse Comitatus Act, which of course would forbids the military from any kind of police action on American soil. However, if this security force is implemented as described by the President, it would become the largest, most heavily armed security force in the world, second only to the United States military. It would have 1,500,000 members in its ranks, over 60% more than the entire population of law enforcement personnel in the United States. Its enormous budget would allow it to purchase any and everything it needs with sufficient reserves to offer economic help for struggling communities and their police departments. And along with that support would come federal control. Now, beware of Washington bearing gifts. Who would the civilian national security force answer to? What authority would it have? Would it supersede state, county, and municipal law enforcement agencies? There's a great deal of disturbing and troubling unanswered questions here. It would do well to remember the history of national security forces, especially in the 20th century. The very first national security force in the 20th century was put together right after the Communist Revolution in Russia in 1917. It was called the Cheka, and it was the forerunner of the Soviet KGB. Its primary function was to maintain the communist government in power. It was ruthless beyond belief. The savagery it inflicted on hundreds of thousands of innocent Russians who died at its hands is unspeakable. Its leader, appointed by Lenin in December of 1917, was a Polish Bolshevik by the name of Felix Dzerzhinsky. Dzerzhinsky made it very clear on the methods used to subjugate and control a civilian population. In an interview he gave in July of 1918, he proudly explained the Cheka and its purpose. He said, and I quote, "We stand for organized terror. This should be frankly admitted. Terror is an absolute necessity during times of revolution. Our aim is to fight against the enemies of the Soviet government and the new order of life. We judge quickly. In most cases, only a day passes between the apprehension of the criminal and his sentence. When confronted with the evidence, the criminal in almost every case confesses. And what argument can have greater weight than a criminal's own confession?" Well, I think you can imagine what force was used to get a confession out of some of these poor people who had to live through that. An author by the name of George Selden, in a book he published in 1929 titled "You Can't Print That," made these comments about the destruction of freedom in Russia and who was responsible. "Freedom and liberty, justice as we know it, all the fundamental human rights for which the world has been fighting for civilized centuries have been abolished in Russia in order that the communist experiment might be made. They have been suppressed by the Cheka." So that one organization, the Cheka, was almost single-handedly responsible for the suppression of an entire nation and its people. And you know, when you examine again the history of national security forces like the Cheka, you almost find they're vicious, they treat people in the worst possible way with imprisonment, torture, and of course, more often than not, death. In Nazi Germany, the notorious Gestapo was formed in April 1933. It was originally headed by Hermann Goering. It eventually turned over to Heinrich Himmler in April 1934. The basic Gestapo law in 1936 gave the Gestapo carte blanche to operate with complete immunity. In many cases, those who were arrested by the Gestapo were sent to the nearest police station. Once in custody, they were told to sign a particular form. This was an order for protective custody, allegedly. By signing this form, you agreed to voluntarily go to prison. Many people, that sounds like something Internal Revenue might want to use. Any adverse comments about Hitler were punishable by death. The question is often asked about ordinary citizens who are forced to live under these diabolical systems. Can the intrinsic evil of the system affect and perhaps corrupt even decent people? Between the late 1930s and early 1940s, fully 80% of arrests and interrogations by the Gestapo were started in response to denunciations by ordinary Germans against their neighbors. Thus, it was ordinary Germans, by their willingness to denounce one another, who supplied the Gestapo with the information that determined whom the Gestapo arrested. When you live under these terrible systems, in order to protect yourself and your family, you're willing to virtually do anything, including lying about your neighbors, your friends, and even family members. You know, how often, we in the John Birch Society are very strong Second Amendment proponents. We believe the right to own firearms. And yet I've met many people who feel as we do, but their attitude is somewhat strange. How often have we seen the bumper sticker that says, the only way you'll get my firearm is to pry my cold, dead fingers from it? You've seen that? Well, I can tell you this, the way these people operate, in order to get your firearm, you will voluntarily go down to a police station and you will turn it in. And you know how they did that? Czechoslovakia, when the Germans moved in, they tried to confiscate firearms. They were successful in getting some, but most people were not willing to give up their firearms. And one day, their children did not come home from school. You want your kids? Bring down your guns. You don't have guns? Go to your neighbor's house and get his. Because you're not getting your children back until we get your guns. These people have methods that, believe me, are very effective. They've written a book on it. Bad stuff. There are many who now see similarities between the systems that existed in the past and the beginnings of what seems to be taking place in America today. Virtually all the tyrannies that existed in the world, both in the 20th century and today, all seem to have one frightening thing in common. They all have an organization whose primary purpose it is to keep the central government in power. And quite coincidentally, they all use the same name or a very similar version of it. The name most often used is the Ministry of State Security. The name pretty much tells you what the purpose is, to maintain the power of the state at all costs. State security, President Obama called ours national security. I don't think there's much difference. In January 1918, the Czechs were given the following authority by Lenin to arrest and imprison Russian citizens without charges, to be detained indefinitely without the right to trial or legal counsel. It took place in 1918. 1936, the Gestapo issued this order to arrest and imprison German citizens without charges, to be detained indefinitely without the right to trial or legal counsel. In 2011, the President signing the National Defense Authorization Act, portion of which allows for the arrest and imprisonment of American citizens without charges, to be detained indefinitely without the right to trial or legal counsel. So you put them all together, folks, and it doesn't spell comfort for those of us who are concerned about the growth and expansion of government. All this, you understand, was done to protect Americans against terrorism. Now we need to identify who the terrorists are. And Homeland Security issued this report in March of 2006. I have a copy, 2009. I have a copy of it here. And in the report, the department made an effort to identify who the potential problems are. They identified veterans coming home from Iraq, Afghanistan. They identified single-issue individuals, people who are pro-life or support Second Amendment, or believe in local, state, and county government, state, county, and municipal government as opposed to federal. Just an outrageous collection of people, all of whom are pretty decent Americans. Yeah, most of you in this room, boy, I tell you, you guys are trouble, according to the Department of Homeland Security. These are the same people, by the way, who gave us Project Gunrunner then in the Department of Justice. You remember what happened there with those guns sold to Mexican drug cartels, came back over the border. So far, I think they've identified at least 3 or 4 homicides, perhaps 1 or 2 Border Patrol agents killed by this very incident. And they're identifying decent Americans as the problem. It's amazing. The information used by the Department of Homeland Security was obtained from an organization called the Southern Poverty Law Center. Some of you know the Southern Poverty.
Oh, God. They know us.
You know what?
Founded in Montgomery, Alabama in 1971 by Morris Dees and Joseph Levine Jr. as a nonprofit civil rights legal firm. The Southern Poverty Law Center has won a few high-profile cases against the Ku Klux Klan, white Aryan resistance, Aryan nations. As a result, they've established themselves in the eyes of many as champions against hate and racism. Those and similar images, like everything else promoted by the Southern Poverty Law Center, are fraudulent images, crafted by the organization's founder and excellent public relations man, Morris Dees. One thing Dees has certainly succeeded at is making the Southern Poverty Law Center a cash cow. Its tax returns for 2010 show assets of $229 million. By the way, they have an offshore account in the Cayman Islands, which they list on their tax returns, but don't tell you what's in it or how much or where the money is going. They've also opened a new headquarters in Montgomery, Alabama, and it's so plush, it's been dubbed the Poverty Palace. Morris Dees has an annual poverty salary. That's working for, help indigent people. He has a poverty salary of $336,000 a year. Southern Poverty Law Center has set up itself as the authority on hate groups and radical extremists throughout the United States. Its effect on the Department of Homeland Security can be seen when in 2009, Janet Napolitano was forced to apologize for the content of that report, where the Department of Homeland Security was forced under the Freedom of Information Act to release the sources of the report. They initially refused to release it, and they were charged under the Freedom of Information Act, so finally it was obtained. It was revealed that most of the information came from the Southern Poverty Law Center and its radical leftist research. More troubling is the fact that Southern Poverty Law Center, in addition to its affiliation with the Department of Homeland Security, also has an ongoing relationship with the Department of Justice, not surprised, and the Federal Bureau of Investigation. When I was a young police officer, the gold standard for law enforcement in America was the Federal Bureau of Investigation. How sad it is to say you see the deterioration of that law enforcement agency. Southern Poverty Law Center also sends its intelligence reports to thousands of police departments and frequently provides seminars for law enforcement personnel regarding conservative, constitutional, and pro-life groups. The Southern Poverty Law Center smears these groups by falsely associating them with the Ku Klux Klan or neo-Nazis. These are groups that would represent the strongest support for local police, and they are being demonized in reports to those very police agencies by the Southern Poverty Law Center, with the purpose, of course, of driving a wedge between the police and their most logical allies. Take a look, for instance, at some of the people on the organizations on the Southern Poverty Law Center's list of hate groups. Dr. James Dodds and his focus on the family ministry, Beverly LaHaye and her Concerned Women for America, the late James D. Kennedy and his Coral Ridge Ministry, David Barton and his Wall Builders Ministry, American Family Association, Catholic Family News, Christian Network, and the National Organization for Marriage. These and other groups are routinely pillared as purveyors of hate by the Southern Poverty Law Center. It's amazing how they get away with this kind of nonsense. Interesting, in a recent, well, I'll get back to that. I want to tell you a story about somebody suing. It's interesting to note that the Southern Poverty Law Center's approval list, the people they approve of, that list includes an unabashed promotion of unrepentant, whether underground terrorists and self-proclaimed communists, Bill Ayers, and his equally notorious wife, Bernadette Dorn. In a September 11, 2001 interview with the New York Times, Ayers stated, "I don't regret setting bonds. I feel we didn't do enough." So this is what the Southern Poverty Law Center holds up as what Americans should emulate and support.
Now called the Obama White House.
The local police in America today are really under attack by a whole range of radical leftist organizations and individuals. From the Southern Poverty Law Center to the Revolutionary Communist Party. Here, they have a national day of protest to stop police brutality. They are also heavily involved in the Occupy movement throughout the country. If anybody who visits these movements will see that communist revolutionary flags, communist slogans, and so forth. A lot of innocent people are being led by the nose by these people. But they think that communism is gone and not here. You can go on their own website, Revolutionary Communist Party USA, and you'll find this stuff every day. Almost all of it represents attacks on police departments. And again, typically of their method, if they attack the local police sufficiently, with sufficient nonsense like this, and it's carried by the regular media, so-called non-communist media, the result is that people get an attitude that the local police are not to be trusted, and we need an alternative. Remember what the communists consider an alternative: an all-powerful central government and a national police force that the president's already recommended that we have. Fortunately now, a number of law enforcement officials are waking up to the threats, not just from the radical leftist groups, but also from intrusions by various federal agencies. An organization was recently formed called the Constitutional Sheriffs and Peace Officers of America. Founded by Sheriff Richard Mack, this group had its first meeting in January in Las Vegas, Nevada. The John Birch Society was a sponsor at this initial meeting, and I had the opportunity to speak privately with 250 sheriffs and their deputies, and also spoke again at a second meeting open to the general public. The reception that the John Birch Society received was really outstanding. The interesting thing about this meeting was listening to a number of sheriffs discussing the problem they encountered from federal officials acting improperly in the sheriff's jurisdiction. Let me give you one illustration of a sheriff in Indiana, Sheriff Rogers. I cannot recall his first name. But there's an Amish farmer in his jurisdiction who produces and sells organic milk, or raw milk, I guess you call it. And the Federal Drug Administration, every week was coming on this farmer's property, demanding all kind of information, record keeping, sales slips, just a variety of things, but it was almost weekly. And finally, after 6 or 7 weeks of this, the farmer said, "Enough, you cannot come on my farm." Chased him. Now, this farm is located in Indiana, close to Indianapolis. He receives a certified letter in the mail from a federal attorney telling him he has to appear before a grand jury in Detroit, Michigan. Now, if you know the Amish, they don't try. He could have taken his buggy and got into Indianapolis with no trouble at all. But to make him to go to Detroit, hundreds of miles away, would have been a serious problem for this man. So he called a local sheriff, Sheriff Rogers. And the sheriff went to visit him, and he explained what was taking place, these weekly visits from these people from the FDA, and so the sheriff sat down and he wrote a lengthy email to the federal prosecutor saying that these agents from the FDA weekly coming onto this property represent a clear violation of this man's privacy. And the only way those agents will be permitted back on this property if they have a search warrant signed by court, Sunday court and the judge. And if they do not do this and they come back on the property, he said the sheriff will have to get involved. So he sent that off to the federal prosecutor in Detroit, and the prosecutor immediately fired back and said to the sheriff, if you get involved or if you interfere with my agents, we're going to arrest you. Threatened to arrest the sheriff. So the sheriff put together a nice cordial email and sent it back and said, look, what's taking place, he said, by the way, I just contacted a constitutional scholar and understand my authority and my rights as an elected sheriff and my responsibility to the constituents in my jurisdiction. If your agents show up at this farm, they will be arrested. A week later, the farmer gets another certified letter in the mail telling him there's no need for him to come to Detroit. The charges have been dropped. But this is typical of what these sheriffs have been up against. The federal agents coming onto their property and coming into their jurisdiction and harassing constituents. And doing so without proper warrants or search or whatever. And most people, when you hear a federal agent at your door, you tend to be a little nervous and you don't want to get yourself in any deeper trouble, so you agree to let them come in and do what they want to do. You have to hold on while I'm through if you have a question.
Did your question answered?
Yeah, well, I'll try to answer some of your questions right there. This, by the way, is from Sheriff Joe Arpaio. Remember Joe Arpaio, the famous sheriff from Arizona? Well, Joe was at this conference, and one of our members had sent him a copy of our bi-weekly magazine, The New American, that had articles about sports or local police. I'll show you what the cover looked like this. And the sheriff had received this, and he was very pleased with it, and he wrote this nice letter back to one of our members, thanking them for the material. Well, he spoke at the same sheriff conference that I was at. In fact, he spoke right after I did, and I had a chance to chat with him, and he's really quite a remarkable guy. The feds, of course, are after him big time. As you know, you'll see daily that they're saying he's abusing people and profiling and so forth. Well, he started his, by the way, he's an incredibly funny man. I mean, he just had a great sense of humor. He started his speech by saying that the federal agencies are saying he's profiling Latinos. And he said, look, I'm in Arizona. Who do you think is coming over the border? He says, every day I pray I'll catch a Canadian. So he went out and he purchased these surplus tents that the Army uses. He said, it's good enough for the United States Army and our military, it's good enough for my prisoners. So he established these tents in an area, and outside he put the American flag on a pole in front of each tent. And the South Americans, who have no respect for us or our flag, destroyed the flag. So they apparently earn a few dollars for whatever kind of work they do. So he started to issue fines to those who were destroying the flag. The American Civil Liberties Union got involved and said, you can't do it. Took them to court, and the courts agreed that these people can destroy the flag. So the sheriff then painted the flag on the tent. And when they destroyed the flag on the tent, he charged him with destroying county property. Also, you recall the famous story about the prisoners having to wear pink shorts. Well, he explained, he said, there was a reason for that. He said every new prisoner that comes into the jail there in Arizona, they're issued 4 pairs of boxer shorts, white. He said, when they leave, we take them, we launder them, put them on a shelf, the next prisoner gets them. He says, unfortunately, they were stealing them. He said, they leave prison, they would steal the shorts. So I made them pink and nobody steals them.
Smart ass dude.
And by the way, he had a pair of those shorts with him at the sheriff's convention. He autographed them and they auctioned them off. Somebody paid $500 for them. So go figure. Anyway, he's just quite a guy, and he's somewhat typical of many of the sheriffs that you find across the country, particularly out in the Midwest. I'm not so sure. I don't have much of an association with the sheriffs here in these. I don't even think Connecticut has.
There is, they eliminated the sheriff.
One of the few states that do not. But I did meet a few of the
The
sheriffs.
only one that doesn't have sheriffs besides Alaska, and Alaska's never had sheriffs.
Yeah, that's interesting.
And neither does Hawaii. Hawaii, Alaska, Connecticut.
They are the highest ranking law enforcement official in most counties throughout the country. Now, in New York, they appoint the sheriffs, so they're not elected, and consequently, they're answerable to whoever appoints them in the liberal establishment in New York, make sure the sheriffs don't do anything they shouldn't do. In New Jersey, where I live, a number of black activists were complaining that the New Jersey State Police, our state troopers, were stopping on our turnpike, which was a conduit, by the way, for drugs in and out of New York, that they were stopping a substantial number of black and Latino drivers. And that the federal government complained, and then they came into New Jersey and had oversight over our state police. So the police were making 500 arrests a year, our state police, on our turnpike for drug crimes, an average of 500 a year. Sometimes 460, sometimes 520, but it averaged out around 500 every year. The result of that was that when the federal oversight came in, and they were not allowed to stop what they considered to be potential drug carriers or drug runners, the arrest fell to less than 100. Now, the significance of that is this. Those drugs are now getting through. Those drugs are going to inner city blacks and Latino kids who are dying from overdoses, who are so strung out on their drug habits, they're committing all kinds of crimes to pay for their drug habits. That should never have happened. The very people who think that by stopping these people involved in drugs that they're profiling have now allowed those drugs into the very communities they think that they're protecting, or at least they're saying they're protecting. And now we're awash in drugs in the inner cities because of that type of behavior. It's just crazy stuff, really bad.
It's even crazier.
The police were allowed to perform their jobs, much of that wouldn't happen. And you know, it's, for those, there may be some police officers here, retired police officers, it's really difficult to explain to people who've never done that kind of work, the kind of things that the average police officer is faced with all the time. The multitude of different tasks he has to learn to accomplish. I recall as a young police officer, one night getting a call from a woman who described herself as a spinster. And I said to her, what's the problem? She said, indecent phone call. I said, when? She said, I'd like one Friday night at 9 o'clock. You know, America has a rich history of law enforcement. In September 1789, the Congress created the first federal law enforcement agency, the United States Marshal Service. 13 were appointed by President Washington. Boston, by the way, Boston, Massachusetts, had the very first paid law enforcement in 1712. It was the first one in the 13 colonies. Over 50 years ago, the John Birch Society recognized the danger of a national police force and instituted a program to educate Americans of the need for local police, The program was entitled Support the Local Police and Keep Them Independent. You can find out more about this and other programs of the John Birch Society be going on our website. The object of the Support the Local Police program was to help Americans understand that police should be accountable to local citizens and local political administration. Actually, the United States is one of the few remaining countries in the world to have widespread local police power. It would be difficult for any country to become a totalitarian state as long as local citizens have direct responsibility for and control over local police departments. In the 1960s and the 1970s, there was a war against the police by a variety of radical organizations, and the national media played a role in this also. This man here, W. Cleon Skousen, former FBI official and chief of police of Salt Lake City, wrote this book, The Communist Attack on U.S. Police, detailing the coordinated and vicious campaign against law enforcement nationwide. Police intelligence squads, congressional investigating committees, and the John Birch Society also came to the same conclusion as Mr. Skousen, that the attack on the police emanated from communist cadres, and the goal was a national police force, or at a minimum, national control over local police. A widespread program of violence in the streets in the major cities was perpetrated by the left. As I pointed out earlier in Newark, storefronts operated by the War on Poverty. All these communist revolutionaries were running these things, paid for by our tax dollars. And when our police officials tried to inform those in Washington about it, they were ignored. And of course, the city went up in flames, as many cities in America did in the time. Part of this program was a typical communist strategy of committing acts of violence against the police. When the police would react, the media would take photographs, and they were used to make the police appear to be overly aggressive in their response. Immediately, the call was heard for the intervention and control over police departments, as well as the call for police civilian review boards. There was, in fact, a civilian review board enacted in New York City in those early days. The John Birch Society, and I was the coordinator for New York at the time, full time, much as what Kid Webster is today. And I went with the New York City Police and local citizens. We went to have the issue because they instituted a civilian review board. So we went to have that issue placed on a ballot where citizens could make the determination about a civilian review board. And we gathered tens of thousands of signatures, and we were able to place it on a ballot where the citizens could vote. And the interesting thing, the one area of the city where we garnered the most votes and had the most success was Harlem, New York. Most people, as much as anybody else, understood the need for police. They were being harangued by criminals in their own areas, and they needed the police there to respond and help them and protect them against those criminals. And when it finally was voted on, it was like 3 to 2 overwhelmingly voted to stop the civilian review board. They voted against it. One of the leading members of this review board, and this is typical of what happens around the country, not so much today because we cannot investigate it, but typical in those days, we were able to find this out. And one of the leading members of the New York City Review Board was a man by Algernon David Klein. Probably doesn't mean much to anybody here. According to a Congressional House Committee report, he belonged to several dozen communist front organizations. And this was somewhat typical of the individual that staffed civilian review boards. As police came before these review boards and were second guessed about their behavior in the street, these people would do everything in their power to demonize the police. And the result was, police wouldn't take the kind of action they might ordinarily do because they were afraid of the consequences of what would happen to them. And so they certainly made a big dent in the morale of police departments. In addition to the local review boards, we have intervention of the federal government with oversight on local and state enforcement agencies because of profiling. And the result is always and inevitably an increase in criminal activity. This is the same administration in Washington now calling for a civilian national security force. It seems to be working at cross purposes against law enforcement at all levels. In the post 9/11 world, we had the Patriot Act, Transportation Safety Administration, and the Department of Homeland Security. Some of these federal agencies are now roaming the airports, dressed in civilian clothes. I managed to photograph one of them at the airport in Newark. Easy. It doesn't take a genius to see how government takes advantage of a crisis. Imposing a civilian national security force would be the result of the next crisis waiting to happen. This should give you some idea of the thinking in Washington, and all the more reason why Americans need to be active and well informed. This is the very reason the John Birch Society was created, to provide the education and leadership to help Americans understand their liberty and work to preserve it. What each of you can do to help maintain the independence of your local police by letting elected officials know you will not tolerate a federal national security force or federal control over your police department. In addition, you can distribute the reprint and DVD that along with this is now nationally. Oh yes, let me point this out. This show you this one. Here. This reprint, it's 2 articles in here, one about the Southern Poverty Law Center, one about the local police, along with a DVD, an 8.5-minute DVD. On that DVD is myself and William Jasper, one of our writers, talking about the Southern Poverty Law Center. Next week, these 2 will be mailed to 22,000 chiefs of police and sheriffs throughout the United States, exposing the Southern Poverty Law Center for the scoundrels that they are, and pointing out the need to maintain the local police, and particularly not to allow law enforcement to get involved in these scoundrels that go to the Southern Poverty Law Center. And we're already finding that many of them are now backing out. I want to show you a video. It's only a few seconds. It's an actual video of 2 detectives in the street. I don't know how this was captured. It was in the Chicago, Illinois area. The 2 detectives confronting an armed man in the street. I want you to look at it, but I want you to answer my question of whether you think in this instance the police behaved properly or not. Take a close look at this. Show it to you again. Okay, let's have the show of hands. Do you think the police acted improperly here?
Hello?
Improper?
Now I'm going to show you this video in slow motion.
Interesting.
Now you'll note that this man has a rifle, and he puts the rifle down with his left hand, right? And it would appear, I mean, if I was a police officer and I was disarming somebody, and he put the rifle down with his left hand, I would naturally relax. Watch his right hand. Watch the right, I mean, this is gonna be in slow motion. Watch the right hand.
He had a right gun in his right hand. He had another gun.
So here's a case where police have to make
Split second.
terrible, quick decisions. Had that man not been shot, the police officer in front of him would probably be dead. He put the gun down with this hand and pulled the handgun out with this hand and fired at the police officer in front of him. But you see, when that video was shown on television, it wasn't slowed down.
Well, and the quality.
Well, of course, it was probably a camera, a telephone camera or something. But, you know, everywhere you show this, people think immediately, the police, why did they shoot this poor guy? But had they not, the police officer would have been dead. Interesting. But these are the kind of decisions that police officers have to make all the time. It's a tough, tough life. They're not always confronted with something this drastic daily. But the fact of the matter is, these things happen at some level of frequency. And, you know, last year alone, we had 164 police officers killed in the line of duty. 70 of them were shot to death, and most of them were ambushed. They were ambushed. Similar to what you see here. If any of you here in this audience were faced with danger, perhaps someone breaking into your home, stealing your car, robbing your business, as a famous line from a movie once said, who you gonna call? Well, we're gonna call the local police or sheriff, just we depend on them for protection. These are the same officers who in many cases are your neighbors, friends, and because of that, they would never think of perpetrating acts against members of their community that the Czech or Gestapo did in Russia and Germany. The only way that could change if local police are replaced by a state or national security force. This is one of the prime reasons for supporting your local police and keeping them independent. These are the same officers who go through the abandoned houses and dark alleys looking for armed suspects. The same officers who must deal with rapists, murderers, drug users, and yes, the occasional irritable citizen who gets in traffic. The same officers are not always successful in their jobs. As I pointed out, we lost 164 killed in the line of duty last year. So when there's trouble, we know who we're gonna call. We're gonna call the local police or sheriff. Thank goodness we have them. And just as importantly, let's make sure their independence is never compromised. Thank you. Yeah, there was a question, gentlemen.
Well, I got a question. The other thing is, can you make a distinction between the independence of the sheriff versus the way our local polices are designed now? Because, you know, law officers, do they have the ability to challenge authority? Because, I mean, our whole political structure, whether it be lawyers, judges, super rich, they're all in collusion with each other. And is there any way where, because it seems like sheriffs seem to be more independent than many of our political.
Yeah, but sheriffs are elected. We see chiefs of police are appointed.
It's like you've got two different kind of law systems.
Well, in a way you do, but let me explain it this way. In the major cities in America, the political administration, whatever its political ideology is, that's the kind of chief of police you're gonna get. If you have a left-wing, liberal city administration, that's the kind of chief of police you're gonna get. The sheriff, on the other hand, is elected by constituents on the county level. He has authority over the chiefs of police. Sheriff Arpaio, for instance, is always at odds with the chief of police in Phoenix. Chief of police in Phoenix is extremely left and liberal. He won't do anything to prevent the illegal immigrants from doing a variety of things. So the sheriff has to intervene where he can and do those kind of things. In many of the smaller communities, you'll find the chiefs of police are pretty good guys. And most of the rank and file, even in the major cities, are really good men. We do see occasional aberrations where police misbehave. And when they do, not only do you have the internal administration and police departments that go after them. An illustration on my way up here, 3 police officers in New York City were fired today. They were involved in a shooting of was it John Bell or Tom Bell? I can't remember his first name. It was a shooting of a young black unarmed black man. Sean Bell. Of Sean Bell, and the officers were found innocent in the trial, court. But the police department felt that they didn't act properly with proper police guidelines. 1 was fired and 2 were forced out. So even though the courts may exonerate a police officer, the internal mechanisms of police departments don't always agree with it. So New York City did what apparently they thought was appropriate under the circumstances and got rid of it. But you're right, there is, across the board, part of the problems I see, the way police officers are trained today. It would have been unthinkable for me as a policeman to arrest somebody that had contraband in a car and then confiscate the car. In turn, I would have called a member of the family to come and take the car, or the police would have towed it to a compound and let a family member pick it up. Today, under asset forfeiture, you lose your car, your boat, your house. I mean, it's just crazy. I can't get my arms around that, but they do it. And sad to say, they're getting away with that. So what we need is legislators to make sure those things are stopped. And that's the only way you're going to stop it. The police their function is to enforce the law. Some of the laws are terrible, but they have no option but to enforce them. So we tend to blame the police when we see them coming to our front door to do something what we think is erroneous. when in fact they don't have any option, they have to do it.
But isn't their first, they take an oath to the Constitution?
Yes.
And, you know, there's a number of people in this room that I know, we could tell you stories of how law enforcement has
I'm sure you could.
has behaved improperly. So, I mean, I support my local law
Yeah.
enforcement. However, what we're coming across, and some of us that are in different groups here, is that FBI is not doing due diligence, local law enforcement is not doing due diligence, and some of us who are, you know, part of patriot groups or sovereign groups or whatever, are being harassed and labeled and demonized because of the lack of due diligence on the part of law enforcement, and they're not honoring their oath to the Constitution, which is what? To protect all of our rights. So, I would invite you to explore that, to help educate law enforcement, that their oath to the Constitution is primary, not the enforcement of laws that violate our rights.
You know, the-
Absolutely.
Interesting,
And that's key, because, you know, there are people in this room who are dealing with simple issues that are being labeled and categorized, and I know somebody who's been on a bracelet in New York State for 7-8 months, and he has not been convicted. He's been, I can tell you a million
Yeah.
stories, but the
They
issue.
probably heard most of them.
Well, the issue is that law enforcement is not honoring their oath to the Constitution.
Let me explain.
And there are videos like that that are true, where the guy didn't have a gun, hundreds of them, and the people with the cameras, their phones are being destroyed, they're being arrested. One guy's facing 75 years for videotaping. So we need help. You know, we're the people
Let me-
that want to support law enforcement,
Let
but
me
we're
answer.
not being supported by law
I
enforcement.
think the first thing you should do, that I would do, I would go visit my local law enforcement agent. I would go visit the chief of police. If you don't have a sheriff here, I would recommend you do that too. I would get acquainted with them. I would sit and talk with them and explain what you see as your complaints. You know, many police officials will act just as they did in New York by letting 3 police officers go for bad behavior, if they're made aware. Frequently, we run into these problems, and we're not always in a position to let the powers that be know that some of their individuals are acting improperly. But again, bear in mind, the police are only enforcing the laws enacted by your legislators. So you're gonna have to visit your state legislators, your federal legislators, and tell them about these terrible, odious laws that people shouldn't have to be facing. I think asset forfeiture is just a crime.
It is. It's
horrible
criminal.
when people do this kind. Now, are there cases where you would use that? Yes, clearly there would be. If you're using, you know, if your car is filled with a couple of tons of cocaine and you're distributing out of your car, it's a different ballgame.
Yeah,
Like
but a
to find
grandmother
somebody-
who loses her home because her crazy grandson
Yeah.
is selling weed, you know.
It's wrong. I agree, it's absolutely wrong. But again, that's a law that the police are required to enforce. So we blame the police, but it's the legislators that enacted that law, and that's where you need to start. Yes, Pauline?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay.
We have GBTV, and watch them every night, and
GBTV?
he's spending now the next 4 months or so on how communism, in the Occupy Wall Street and all these other places, he's going, step by step by step about how communism takes over. He's kind of left the progressive thing, you know, with Woodrow Wilson and that group, and he's now concentrating primarily on communism. And of course, you know, the new Occupy Wall Street, when is it gonna start? May 1st, like, we don't know what May 1st is.
Mayday.
Those Occupy movements around the country, on the Revolutionary Communist Party website, they'll tell you, they'll give you the
Media
names of the
Matters,
people that
George
are organizing
Soros.
it, and their people. You know, interesting, I read on one of the websites here 2 or 3 days ago, gosh, I wish I remembered the name, but a United States congressman from Illinois, probably the Chicago area, was awarded was given an award that was named after a top communist in South Africa. He accepted the award at Communist Party headquarters in Chicago, United States congressman. It's crazy, some of the things that are happening. Yes, sir.
My feeling is, studying this for years, it is changing. We sat back for several decades, assuming that the government knew what they were doing. They didn't know what they were doing. Philosophically, completely different from what we believe. But
They are
it is
following a
changing.
plan.
There's a group out there now that are taking police officers and saying, you will swear to uphold the Constitution. That's number one. So it is starting to change.
I agree.
Hillsdale College, if no one knows, has a program on the Constitution. It's a series of 6 or 8 or 10 lectures. What we need to do is educate our children, the next generation. It's too late for me. The next generation is being absolutely brainwashed in our public schools to accept anything, anybody that walks in with a uniform on, he's next to God.
We're doing something about that. The John Birch Society has a foundation, American Opinion Foundation. Within the foundation, we have an educational program called Freedom Project Education. We now offer curriculum online from kindergarten through high school, constitutional courses and others. And the courses are so good, many colleges are now, Ohio State's using it, Indiana is using it, several others. So if you go on our website, the American Opinion Foundation, and look under Freedom Education Project, you'll find tremendous courses on the Constitution, and they're really well done stuff, I mean, really good. So, yes, sir.
Appreciate no camera on me first of all. sir.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, you got it.
First half of your video, I had a problem with that, I almost actually left.
Okay.
Because you were talking about the terrorists and 9/11 and the drug deals. But it seems like you're maintaining the good-bad paradigm, which is no different than the left-right paradigm of the Democrats Republicans. Now, Al-Qaeda was created by the CIA,
1979.
by Zbigniew Brzezinski.
That's
They
right.
also created Medellin. Now, you've got the highest offices of our government creating all the problems in the world.
Hegelian
And you've
dialectic.
got the highest offices of our government trying to fight against all these problems in the world. And everything goes right to the top. But nobody's getting to the heart of the problem, where the problem with this country is our highest forms of government. And obviously our president, he's actually got 37 levels of security above him. And no one is truly getting to the heart of the problem, which is the same people controlling both the terrorists and the good and the fighting.
First of all, let me interrupt you and say that isn't true. Let me tell you what
Well,
we're doing.
Oh, yes, it is
By
true.
the CIA
Yeah,
to
so let me
create
tell you what we're
Al-Qaeda.
doing about the problem. We agree that much of the difficulty emanates from the federal government, both internally and externally in the country. And how do you exercise any kind of effort to make a change in that? Who can make that change? What agency of our government has the responsibility to be able to do something about that? The Constitution of the United States empowers the United States Congress to make those changes. If you examine the Constitution, and most of you, I'm sure here have done it, you sound like pretty bright folks. The Constitution gives the United States Congress enormous authority. Number one, and probably the easiest one to use, is they control the purse strings of the country. They can withdraw funds from any of these agencies. Two, they have the ability to declare war. Now, they're not exercising these rights, I agree with you, but they need to. Three, they have appellate jurisdiction over the courts. They could simply issue congressional delegations that do not allow the courts to get involved in a whole range of topics and subjects. And the Congress the United States House of Representatives is pretty close to us. We have, I don't know how many districts you have here in Connecticut, but you can impact them. I go to Washington about once every 3 or 4 months, and I'm meeting with congressmen and senators, and these are the issues we discuss. They're well aware of it. There is, typical within the political parties, there are those who just want to stay and get elected to be congressmen and senators, and there are those who are genuinely concerned and making some effort to change them. There are not enough of them. So what I recommend that you folks do is start educating voters so they'll make the right judgment at the polls. Local legislators, state, county, federal. You start getting good congressmen in office, and you'll begin to change things. So one of the things we in the John Birch Society are doing is we're trying to establish these educational entities throughout the country. We start by hiring full-time coordinators in states where we think we can have a big impact. For instance, we've now, in the last year and a half, have staffed states like North and South Dakota, Montana, Wyoming, Vermont. Each of those states have only one congressman. One. So if we can educate enough voters to get a really good congressman elected, either Democrat, Republican, Independent, we don't care. As long as he lives up to his oath of office with the Constitution. We can educate enough voters, and you don't need the huge majority. You need a good, solid core who are gonna take that information and spread it. You get, not only do you get the good congressman, because the same people who vote for that one congressman vote for those two senators. They vote for the governor. They vote for the state legislature. We can impact an entire state with a tremendous effort on the education level, and we're doing it. We're doing it in those 4 states I mentioned. We're doing it in other places in the country. Look at South Carolina as an illustration. They took a very liberal, democratic congressional group down there, 7 of them. 6 of them were run out in the last election. And the 6 congressmen who took their place, headed by Congressman Mulvaney, who I speak with frequently, just a terrific guy, constitutionalist, Congressman Duncan, Congressman Scott, really good, solid men. But our members down there educated the voters, so they put these good men in office. Now the thing is, we've got to keep them there. So my recommendation, is it easy? Is it a fast fix? No, it's not. There's no easy fix. We're gonna have to do due diligence, do our job of educating our friends, our neighbors, our co-workers, our relatives, to get good people in public roads. I'm gonna take one more question.
The Occupy movement, the Occupy movement is being demonized. You need to go down there and talk to these people. They are brilliant, they are talented. I've been there numerous times. If you haven't been there, then you don't know what you're talking about.
Can I comment
I
on
agree with her as well.
Let's get this one last question.
Yeah, they're infiltrated.
Couple of points.
Well, it's whatever
It's been
the
over
media
20
says,
years
that's
since
what
I've gone into
we
the
have to leave it out there. And we're
Please.
And he has the floor. It's been over 20 years since I've gone into the law books for the state of Connecticut. But when I was in there, after extensive research, I asked the librarian to help me. I could not find a single reference in the state laws to police officers for Connecticut. They are referred to exclusively as peace officers. And the difference between a police officer, as you've mentioned, who is here to enforce the laws, and a peace officer, they're here to ensure the peace. There's a fundamental breakdown in the purpose, the function of what they were supposed to be. Another point, you mentioned illegal immigrants. I've been talking with several lawyers, and in order for an immigrant to be deemed illegal, they must first go through the court system, and the court must deem them illegal. Up until they have been declared illegal by the court system, they are simply undocumented. An illegal immigrant is somebody who has gone through the court system and has been declared illegal by the courts. Up until that point, they are simply undocumented.
You know, our federal officials take an oath of office to defend the United States against invasion, both foreign and domestic. We're being domestically invaded from Mexico, 20 million of them, we were saying. And if that's not illegal, I'm not sure if the word has any meaning. We're gonna have to wrap this up, folks. I'd like to just take somebody.
Just a real quick thing, can you talk about like marshals, what the power of the marshals are? Because I've been seeing that like constitutionally marshals have a lot of power, and I think they might be the one who actually, they make it like they're the ones with a lot of power actually, it's marshals.
Not in Connecticut.
In Connecticut, they're
We don't have a
pushers.
sheriff.
These are
Yeah, the paper
federal
pushers,
marshals.
right.
Marshals are service.
So what do marshals have power over?
They
Nothing.
deliver
Process.
warrants and they're process servers. So
But
their
isn't
job
that
is-
better than the federal, is having state?
No.
No, they're federal officials.
they're
They have them on
similar to a
airplanes now. A lot of airplanes have federal marshals as guards. As somebody pointed out, that they move federal prisoners. Part of their job is to take federal prisoners and move them around the country, or take people who've been convicted and move them.
So they don't have power over the federal power
Well,
still has
some
power
talk,
over them?
It's interesting. When the president mentioned the National Security Force, there was some talk about using the federal marshals
Mhm.
as the backbone of that force. I only heard it mentioned once and never again.
Okay.
So that's all.
All right, thank you.
But listen, we gotta wrap it up, and I'll be happy to stay and chat with somebody if you'd like. Thank you.
if I may. My name is John Byler. I'm state chapter president of the Oath Keepers in Connecticut. The oath they took wasn't just something to get them through the day. It was a lifetime issue. So we have to talk with them. Going around and talking to anybody that you know that's in the police department and such is incredibly important. One of our goals is reach, teach, and inspire. We have cards, we have brochures, we're constantly trying to do that. And we need about a couple of million more people doing the same thing. So, yes, I'm sorry.
What about in the police academies where they're very poor, doesn't this work?
No, it's
I mean, why do we have to choose compensation?
Because they're not getting the right.
Isn't that evolving?
Well,
Would it be an asset?
let me point out that the sheriff's convention I spoke of earlier in Las Vegas, almost every one of those sheriffs said that they took the oath of office, Constitution, and they hadn't even read it. And only now that they're up against all of these problems are they learning about their Constitution and what they're about. So the same applies here with local police. Part of the training is learning, asset forfeiture, things like that. Police are being trained, in my view, on the wrong things. And again, that goes back to the political administrations that you elect to do these things, and that's where you gotta start. So you gotta engage with the police and let them know that we're friends, we're not the enemy. And we'd like to folks to know that we wanna maintain a local independent police force, and not have some guy in Washington dictating what our local police do.
Can I comment on something, please? Going back to your answer to my question, this country has two constitutions. First one goes up to Lincoln. The second one is a corporate constitution. The United States is a corporation. They take the oath to the corporate constitution. The one that we believe in does not pertain to the United States Corporation. The United States is not a country, it's a corporation in Delaware. There is a huge difference. If everybody can please look up those differences, you'll be getting a wealth of knowledge. Thank you.